Well, welcome back to another episode of the New News Podcast. Andrew and Sandy were covering an infamous topic in the New News Podcast
Oh
history.
boy.
I wasn't here for this, so all
No,
of
you
your
weren't.
guys' crazy takes about the Cubs last year, I don't wear any of those. But we did wait a little while. We did or Sandy and Andrew did a Brewers and Reds preview earlier this offseason. Since both of them were pretty much done making moves at that point, we've been waiting for the Cubs to inevitably sign Cody Bellinger, and they finally did it recently. So the Cubs offseason is pretty much over at this point, we would think. So quickly, we're going to do a quick rundown of their offseason moves. And then in this episode, we want to preview kind of what our expectations are for the Cubs in 2024, what we think they can do, maybe where you guys went wrong with the predictions last year, and then maybe talk a little bit about how do the Cardinals and Cubs fare compared to each other in 2024. So if you missed most of their offseason moves, they obviously started out with the big swing for Craig Counsell that kind of came out of nowhere. And it really backed up what we thought was going to be a really, really aggressive offseason from the Cubs. They were linked to so many stars. We'll talk about them later. And then they kind of didn't do anything for a while. I think they were the last team to sign a player to a major league deal in the offseason. It took them the longest. They ended up signing Shota Imanaga, Hector Neris, and then obviously they brought back Cody Bellinger a few weeks ago. And then they brought in Michael Busch via trade, so he was a top prospect in the Dodgers system. And really the only big loss they had was losing Marcus Stroman, who was a very impactful player in the first half for them. Second half was pretty much non-existent. When he was pitching, was not good. So interesting offseason, I would say, at least. Sandy, initial thoughts, like Cubs offseason. You hear those moves, like those moves. How do you think they're stacking up coming into 2024 off of that?
Yeah, I think the Cubs had a pretty good offseason for sure. I like Michael Busch, but I know a lot of people aren't super high on him. He's pretty old for a prospect. I think he's like 20, 24, 26 or something like that. But yeah, they've made solid moves, or at least solid enough moves. I'm not sold on Shota Imanaga. That's probably due to Andrew's influence, though, because he is the king of not being sold on Shota Imanaga.
Yeah.
The Bellinger move was really frustrating for me personally. I really wanted him to just leave the NL Central because he had a great season last year. The other thing is I wanted the Cubs, if they were going to bring him back, to do so committing a massive amount because, again, I don't like the Cubs. I don't want them to do well. So that was actually a really savvy move by them. And they kind of, they played their hand really well. They let Bellinger overplay it's probably Scott Boris's influence. And then when he became too late for him to actually get something real anywhere else, he came back on a deal that has basically no commitment. He has opt-outs each of the next couple of years, so he can go back to free agency. But the AAV is also shockingly low. People were predicting that he was going to get somewhere around 200 at the beginning of the offseason. I will say, though, I'm glad that they swung and missed on those big free agents, like Josh talked about. I remember at one point we were talking about Shohei Ohtani being linked to the Cubs. I'm glad that didn't happen. But overall, I don't know. It's a really mid offseason. Like, they probably got a little bit better. I think for the Cubs, the real source of growth, and we'll talk about that later in this episode, is going to be the young talent, which even as someone who doesn't like the Cubs, I have to admit, it's quite impressive.
We'll have to come back to that, but the fact that you have to admit it's quite impressive is just a 180 from the last time this video was recorded. Yes, Andrew, what about you, man? How do you feel about their offseason?
Yeah, I feel like the Cubs, with Craig Counsell, we were like, oh, they made him the highest paid manager ever, so they're probably going to swing for all these big guys like Ohtani, who they did not sign, Juan Soto, who they did not get. Yamamoto, I think, was linked to them at some point. They just missed on all these guys. And at the end of the day, you look at their team this year and you look at their team from last year, there's not much change, except for one aspect that I think is really worth noting, and that's like the front of the rotation, right? So they had Justin Steele, Marcus Stroman coming into last season. It's pretty solid 1-2 punch at the top of that rotation. And now instead, Stroman opts out. He goes to the Yankees, and you bring in Imanaga, who, in my opinion, is not the most exciting Japanese pitcher. I feel like a lot of people see the name like, oh, Japan won the WBC, their talent must be so good. And Imanaga, I believe, was the winning pitcher of record in that final game, which is a little bit misleading because he was one of the pitchers for Japan that performed the worst in that game. So that's something to note. Not all of their talent is going to be really good and translate well to Major League Baseball. We've seen that a lot. And I thought Imanaga, with all the reports, was going to get like a 9-figure deal, and I was just not in on that at all. He posted a 108 ERA plus in Japan last year. It's not park adjusted, but it gives you a rough idea of where he stands relative to a lot of those pitchers. And I don't think will fill Marcus Stroman's shoes at all, because Marcus Stroman had like a 116 ERA plus in Major League Baseball, which is a much higher level league. And I'm not sold on that move. I know I'm going to get blowback if he starts playing well, and I'm ready for that. But I just don't think they really got any better. Like, they're kind of the same team last year minus Marcus Stroman, and they replaced him with someone who I am not sold is going to be anything more than like a slightly above replacement level arm in that rotation. Like, if you were giving me Imanaga and Kyle Gibson on a 1-year deal, then yeah, I would take Imanaga because he has more upside. But with the 3-year, 4-year deal that Imanaga got and Kyle Gibson on a 1-year deal, honestly, I would take Kyle Gibson because there's just less risk in that kind of contract. So I don't know, not fully sold on their offseason.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as much of like a Debbie Downer on Shota as you are. I like that he's got the strikeout stuff. The only thing that really concerns me is his home run rate, which I cannot remember who did this piece. But if it comes to me, I'll try to give credit. But someone was looking at Imanaga and comparing how pretty much every Japanese player or pitcher that's come over stateside usually almost sees their home rate at least double, if not go up higher when they get to the United States. And his was already at like 1 a game, I think, or maybe a little over 1 a game, or 1 every 9 innings. So if you're like giving up 2 home runs every 9 innings, that's really bad. And then I really don't like that. Maybe that's something he fixes in the United States, especially because that's a contact-oriented league. So I don't know, maybe he's just giving out more contact. But I would think more so like he's maybe going to get maybe uptick in strikeouts, but an uptick in home runs too, because of the fact that guys are swinging for the fences all the time. So I don't love that. But I think maybe would be important for us to break down too, especially that first move that is kind of like, it kind of rocked Cardinal Nation for a little bit, that the fact that they had gotten Craig Counsell and then it's kind of flown under the radar since then. But how significant, Sandy, do you feel like Craig Counsell is as a hire for the Cubs?
Yeah, personally, I'm not a huge like manager impacts the game guy. It's been my take with Ali Marmol. It's been pretty consistent. It's like, I don't think the manager impacts the game on the field that much. I'm pretty upfront about that. So I think hiring Craig Counsell is there's a lot of hoopla around it, and I think a lot of it's overblown. However, I will say Craig Counsell, even people like me who seem to believe managers aren't the most important thing ever, they agree that Craig Counsell is one of the better managers in baseball. And it seems like a pretty consensus take that like Craig Counsell gets the best out of his players. He creates a good dynamic, a good culture. And so, yeah, I think it's a big deal for the Cubs to get a manager like him. But also, I don't know. Managers are weird, and assessing their impact on the game is hard. It's also different everywhere you go. It could be completely different for Counsell in Chicago than it was in Milwaukee. I don't think we can fully commit to it being one thing or the other. And also just remembering the fact that when the Cubs hired David Ross, they were super excited about that, and they were just happy to get rid of Joe Madden. And when they hired Joe Madden, they were super excited about that, and they were just happy to get rid of the previous manager. So I think there's some of that too. I just don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. He maybe changes 5 games a season, tops.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like that's significant because if say David Ross was changing 2 or 3 games for the worse for them, and Craig Counsell does 5 games for the better, that's like an 8-game swing. Yeah. So I feel like I agree in terms that I don't take a ton of stock in managers having a huge impact on the game, but I do think I agree. I'm not sold on this, so I'm not going to fight anyone on it. But I feel like Counsell is not just like one of the better managers in baseball. It's pretty much agreed on. He's the top 3 too, if not the best manager in baseball. And what the job he's done with this Brewers team the last few years, other opposing managers, umpires, opposing players have talked about how annoying and how good Craig Counsell is at some of the little things that make a really good manager, and kind of he just has a good feel for when he needs to have guys up in the bullpen or make certain changes. And so I think that stuff's significant and stuff that a lot of fans complain about with Marmol, even if I don't agree that it's a huge issue or as big of an issue as other people do. It's clear that Counsell doesn't have an issue with a lot of that stuff. But I like that point, Sandy, that just because it worked in Milwaukee doesn't mean it's going to work from Chicago. So there's some differences there. But I would actually make this move as more akin to the Joe Madden thing than the David Ross one.
Yeah.
Because Madden's voices run thin there. And then also, and so they brought in David Ross, inexperienced manager. This is like when they got Joe Madden, where he was one of the best managers in all baseball, and he came over to take over a club that's ascending. And so I think it's very similar. I don't see them making an immediate super strong push toward the World Series. But I do think it's made them better. Andrew, thoughts on the Craig Counsell part of it?
I mean, I just don't really like Craig Counsell as a Cardinals fan.
Oh, me either.
Bouncing around.
This is annoying. I was so happy. I was like, he's going to be a Met. I don't like the Mets either, but at least it's out of the NL Central. So I was so pissed.
Yeah, but I don't know. A manager, I feel like it doesn't affect the game as much as a lot of people think that it does. I'm sure Cubs fans would be like, oh, yeah, David Ross. I almost said Joe Ross, but David Ross was like responsible for us like choking our playoff spot late in the season last year. But honestly, like, David Ross didn't tell Seiya Suzuki to fumble the ball that gave the Braves that win that one time. He didn't like tell anyone to like make any of the like really bad errors that cost the Cubs games towards the end of the season. So like I'm not fully sold that a manager really has all that much of an impact on the game. I think a lot of the decisions made on the field are kind of predetermined by analytics and in the front office. I know Ollie kind of dispelled some of that, but he gets all his analytics from the front office and from the analytics department, which hasn't changed from my understanding for the Cubs organization. So I don't really think Craig Counsell is going to win that many more games for the Cubs. They only won 83 games last year. As I said, I thought they got worse. So maybe Craig Counsell evens it out and they still win 83 games again this year, which might get them in the playoffs, might get them a wild card spot, but will it be good enough to contend and win the division? Probably not.
I'm curious why you I'm not necessarily fully disagreeing with it, but I'm curious why you think they got worse. Because obviously Bellinger isn't like a new signing, so he just comes back. And yes, you did lose Stroman, you replaced him with Monica, but they did get Hector Neris, Craig Counsell, and then Michael Busch too. So it feels like, and overall, it felt like a net positive for them. I think my take more is I think they overachieved last year. I don't think they should have been as good as that. So I think like they actually made strides, but I think there's some natural maybe regression there. But then also they have a lot of young guys that, which you saw in the second half, but then there's also a lot of young guys that could take steps forward. So it's a hard team for me to put a finger on about where I feel like they're at. But I don't know if there's anything specific other than losing Stroman that you felt like made them worse.
Yeah, I feel like some regression from Bellinger and from some of the players that overperformed a little bit. Bellinger's peripherals honestly weren't all that impressive. So true. I was really hoping that the Cubs would give him like a $200 million deal. Unfortunately, that didn't end up happening because Bellinger's market kind of fizzled out towards the end. But I still don't think he's all that great of a hitter. Honestly, I think Seiya Suzuki might be the best overall hitter on the entire team. Swanson and Horner are kind of league average bats. Ian Happ is slightly above league average, but other than that, I'm not completely sold that Bellinger will be what he was for the Cubs last year. And Justin Steele, he was super scary, but he's also like only had one really good season. And I don't know if he can replicate that. We'll see. Obviously, their rotation with him, as good as it was last year, if he's as good as he was last year, then that would be really scary. But he also had a really bad September, and that's worth looking into. Maybe hitters started figuring him out. And I don't know if he'll be as dominant as he was in 2023. That's complete conjecture. I'm not fully sure about any of the numbers there, but I feel like Steele may have overperformed a little bit as well. And that rotation is kind of relying on him to be the ace of the staff. Tyone is not someone who I think can be relied on anymore, and they paid him a lot of money. Kyle Hendricks obviously is old, but he'll still kill the Cardinals, so that's fine. I'll wear that when it eventually happens. And then Imanaga, again, not sold on him. So the rotation just doesn't look that great.
Yeah, let's talk about the pitching because I feel like that's a good segue here. I feel like in a lot of ways, Oddly, their pitching staff is very similar to what the Cardinals are doing, where you
I think
have a
so
clear
too.
number one and then 2 through 4. That's not super exciting. I would probably give the Cubs the edge because I think Imaniga probably is. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Personally, I'm high on Steven Matz, so I think Steven Matz could outperform him, but I also feel like Imaniga is probably more like a number 3 than he is a number 4 or 5 starter, which is better than we can say about the Cardinals guys right now. Jordan Wicks is a young arm who's already up and it's got some nice stuff, so he could be someone. They've got some prospects coming up, like Cade Horton seems like he's a little bit of a ways away, but Ben
Cade
Brown's
Horton
got
might
really
be
good.
really, really good.
Yeah. So like 2024, maybe
Yeah.
not an issue, but like Ben Brown, he had not great like counting stats in terms of ERA and stuff into AAA last year, but I think he had like a 12K per 9, so he's got some nasty stuff. So they've got some other pitchers coming through, but yeah, if you're asking like for as high as people are on the Cubs, I look at their lineup. Okay, we can get to that in a minute. I look at their rotation and I'm like, okay, Steele, yes. Ty Young, I hated the deal for them when they signed him. I was like, this
Horrible
is
deal.
beautiful. And he proved me right last year. So I feel like he'll be a little bit better than he was last year, but he's like a 4 or 5 starter to me. Kyle Hendricks, again, he always kills the Cardinals, but he's a 4. He's projected 4.6 ERA this year, 4.5 for Ty Young, 4.38 for Wicks, and then a 3.7 for Imaniga. So I'm not huge on the rotation. Sandy, how do you feel about the rotation?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it's amazing. I think, like you're saying, it's kind of a mid-floor, mid-ceiling rotation at best. Steele might be really, really good. And that's fair to say. He had a great season last year. But like you're saying, there's just not a ton of exciting options after that. And that does resemble the Cardinals. Sonny Gray is really, really good. And after him, the options are significantly less exciting. I'm probably with you. I think some of the younger arms, Ben Brown could be closer than people think. I think Cade Horton, depending on how aggressive the Cubs want to get, could be closer than people think. The Cubs have been aggressive with prospects in the past, especially if we're going to compare the Craig Counsell tenure to the Joe Madden tenure. They were very, very aggressive in promoting top prospects back then. And I think if the Cubs have an overachieving first half, you could see them become really aggressive. And I think if they do that, there's a chance that some of these scarier young arms reach the big leagues quickly. Yeah. But also their pitching depth in the minors actually isn't that great. Cade Horton obviously could be special. Well, I'm looking at their top prospects here, and I know that Cade Horton and Ben Brown are really good arms with a lot of potential. I'm not as high on Jordan Wicks as other people. And then after that, they really only have 5 or 6 pitchers in their top 22 on MLB Pipeline. So it's pretty position player heavy. So I'm not saying their farm system's bad. The Cubs have a really good farm system right now. But the amount of pitching depth, just the number of arms, isn't quite as great as it's been in the past. So, and like you said, the Tyone deal is terrible. And we'll get into the lineup. I think the lineup's their real weakness.
But interesting. Okay, well, we'll get to that. One thing I was looking at, and I'm like, okay, this might be where I like. I'm definitely not gonna try and make an argument right now that the Cardinals have a better rotation than the Cubs. I don't think it's that big of a difference, but I would probably give the edge to the Cubs here. And I would give them an edge in terms of like if they're aggressive with some of those young arms and they're ready, then I really give the Cubs the edge. But if you like look at these guys, like Steele is a guy who can maybe get like 170, 180 innings, but after that, I mean, Tyone maybe will eat some innings, but Hendricks, I mean, he's projected 150 innings this year, and last year he was at 137. It was 150 for Tyone last year. Wicks, I mean, he only threw 30 last year, so I don't see him being an innings eater this year. That could be an edge for the Cardinals, where like even though they're like not like I would say again, I think Imaniga talent wise over the next 4 Cardinal starters after Gray right now. But Michaelis, Lynn, and Gibson should go deep in the games and give the Cardinals a lot of innings. And with that bullpen helps out a lot. When I look at this team, I'm like, I don't like Hendricks is not the guy who's going to give you 5 shutout innings anymore. So if he's not going deep in the games, he's probably giving you 5 with 3 earned, 4 earned. I'm like, not ideal here. Same with Tyone. So like, I think there might be a little bit of an edge there.
There's definitely a chance that Tyone is the worst pitcher between both the Cubs and the Cardinals. Last year, he was awful, and he wasn't that unlucky. Like, he really did just stink.
Yeah, I don't like him, and that's not a revisionist thing. I remember the offseason, the Cubs, I was so happy because the Cubs signed 2 of the people I wanted the Cardinals to stay away from. It was Tyone and Swanson. I was like, do not sign those 2 guys, and then they got them both. But obviously, they did a lot. The Cubs did a lot better than they thought they would. How about their bullpen? I mean, they got Neris. They already had some interesting arms in there. it's not flashy, but I feel like it got things done last year. It wasn't necessarily a huge strength of them, but I mean, they had some good arms back there. But is that something like, I don't know, comparable to the Cardinals? Is that, I don't know. I feel like I'd take the Cardinals bullpen over the Cubs right now.
Right now,
Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
the Cubs got the guy I really wanted the Cardinals to avoid this offseason in terms of pitching. So anyway, I think the bullpen wise, Neris was someone that I wanted to go out and grab, but I don't know. I think they're comparable in terms of pitching staff. I would take Steven Matz over Imanaga any day, but I think the pitching for comparison is closer. It's closer than we, or it's about as close. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's extremely close.
Closer than people are giving it credit for, probably.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think the bullpens are actually pretty different, to be honest. The Cubs don't have the shutdown reliever that the Cardinals have in Ryan Helsley.
I agree.
And even if Neris is really good, which he's coming off a season in which he had a lot of things go his way, Ryan Helsley is a top 5 reliever in all of baseball if he's healthy. MLB just ranked him as number 2. So it's not just me saying this. A lot of other respected baseball people have said this.
Yeah.
I just don't see them having that kind of lockdown potential at the back. And the Cardinals have 3 to 4 guys with real closing potential and real closing experience in Romero, Helsley, Gallegos. I just think that's a better back end. And also, as we've talked about ad nauseum on here, the Cardinals' middle options are surprisingly good this year. They have a lot of interesting arms. I think there are going to be relatively few teams that have the depth that they have in the bullpen. So I might keep the Cubs a slight edge in starting rotation, but I think the Cardinals have a higher floor there. Cardinals definitely have the higher floor and higher ceiling in the bullpen. I will say that.
I totally agree with the bullpen. Rotation, I'd say give the Cubs the edge, probably higher floor. And also, like, people giving the Cardinals crap for having an old staff. You look at the Cubs rotation has a 34-year-old, a 30-year-old, 32-year-old. So not necessarily that. I mean, I know you got Wicks, 28-year-old Steele, but then their bullpen, Neris is 34, Merriweather's 32, Smiley is 34, Leiter Jr. is 33. They got a couple 29-year-olds in there. Not a lot of super proven guys in there. Again, Helsley's by far and away the best reliever between the two teams. And then you've got Kittredge, Middleton, who I feel like I would probably, Alzolay, I feel like is probably the second or third best reliever out of that.
He's the X factor in that bullpen.
Yeah, but then after that, like Neris, I'd put him in the same tier as Middleton and Kittredge. I'd probably take both of those guys over him, but like sure, Neris could be better. But then after that, I really like the Cardinals' depth there. So yeah, I think the Cardinals have the far superior rotation, which if their rotation does what it needs to do, which is eat innings, get them to this 5th or 6th inning, or even if it can't do that, they can turn to the bullpen and use that strength in the way that I think the Cubs need their starters to go deeper into games and do well. So yeah, I think we could beat the rotation bullpen up ad nauseum, but I feel like the good conversation between us is going to be the lineup, because I feel like all three of us are going to come from different spots. It sounds like with it. Andrew, how about you start us off? How do you feel about the Cubs lineup?
Yeah, I feel like they have a pretty strong 1 through 6. I'll pull up their projected lineup right now. It's Horner, Swanson, Happ, Bellinger, Suzuki, and Morel. And I feel like all of those guys are quality hitters. They're all going to give you good at-bats, but none of them are like true superstars. I think out of all of them, personally, my hot take is that Seiya Suzuki is the best hitter out of all of those guys last season.
Over Bellinger?
He put up a 124 OPS plus and hasn't played a fully healthy season yet in Major League Baseball, but you look at his Japanese numbers, and he was one of the top hitters in a league where it's really hard to be a good hitter. So I put a lot of stock in that. If you're a good hitter in Japan, you're probably going to be a really good hitter here as well. And I feel like if he puts together a fully healthy season, he could see like a WRC plus around 125, 130, which would be one of the better hitters in the Cardinals lineup as well. But other than him, Bellinger, I feel like is going to take a step back. He'll still be pretty good, but I don't see him doing what he did in 2023. But I think the 1 through 6 looks pretty solid.
Can you restate that 1 through 6 really quickly?
Horner, Swanson, Happ, Bellinger, Suzuki, Morel.
Okay.
And Michael Busch 7. He could turn out to be a pretty good prospect. Jan Gomes and Nick Madrigal are kind of irrelevant, but so are most teams' 8th and 9th hitters, aside from some of the top lineups in all of baseball. I still think the Cardinals lineup is much better. Would I argue that the Cardinals are better at every position? I would not. I'm not going to say that at all. But I still think the Cubs lineup is.
Wouldn't it be a terrible take, though?
Not the worst take ever.
It would make for a good.
It could. We could maybe make the argument. Sorry. Keep going.
So I don't know. I feel like their lineup with Bellinger was significantly better than it was without him. Obviously, I was looking at it before they signed Bellinger, and when the rumor was that they wouldn't spend more money this offseason, and I was like, oh, okay, if they don't have Bellinger, I'm not really scared of them at all, because the rotation is about as good as the Cardinals rotation, and their lineup is significantly worse. So I don't really see any issue there. But if they hadn't added Bellinger, honestly, you might be able to make that argument. But I think Swanson is currently better than Mason Wynn, who's unproven so far, but maybe by the end of the season. Anyway, their lineup definitely strikes me as a lineup that could go into the playoffs and compete. It's probably the second best lineup in the division.
I don't hate the lineup. I think it's fine. I don't think they're comparable at all, though. Like, I'm seeing in the chat a little bit that maybe if Morel's good, that the Cubs lineup is comparable to the Cardinals. Cardinals have 2 guys projected over 120 WRC plus right now with Walker and Goldschmidt. The Cubs have 1 in Seize Suzuki. They only have Bellinger's like 9% above league average for them. I think he's gonna be better than that. So maybe you could put him in should be over 120 as well. But then the Cardinals have 6 guys that are projected to have over 110 WRC plus. The Cubs have 3 or 4. I think it was 3. It's a strong, like, if you like, even if the Cubs strength is their 1 through 6, the Cardinals like elite strength is 1 through 6. I mean, like the Cubs, like Horner and Swanson last year were both barely above league average offensively.
They were below league average offensively.
I thought they were both slightly above.
Oh, I use OPS plus.
Okay. I was using WRC plus. Yeah. So like Swanson was 104, Horner was 102. And I mean, I'm sorry. Like, part of the reason they're such good players is they're really good defensively, so that gives them value. But like when you talk about your 1-2 of Swanson and Horner versus Brendan Donovan and Paul Goldschmidt, give me Brendan Donovan and Paul Goldschmidt.
All day.
Talk about Nootbaar, Arenado, Contreras, Gorman, Walker. Like, he was all the way down to 7 compared to Suzuki, Bellinger. I mean, Morel. Like, okay, that's fine. But like the Cardinals I just think it's night and day. The Cardinals have a better lineup. I do think if we're going position by position, the 2 best players on the Cubs position players are their shortstop and center fielder, which is probably the 2 quote unquote weakest parts of the Cardinals lineup right now. So they clearly have the edge there. But catcher, I take Contreras. First base, I take Goldschmidt. Left field, I take Nootbaar. Second base, I take Gorman or Donovan, and the other one at DH. I take Walker in right field. Suzuki's pretty close. So like I think if you take him, that's fine. I think Walker is the higher ceiling this year, though. Arenado at third base, I take. So I don't think it's close lineup wise.
I'm taking Ohtani at oh wait. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I don't think we talked about it. Like, or you did talk about Ohtani and Missy on Soto and Pete Alonso and Bo Bichette. Like,
so funny. I remember the Bo Bichette rumors were the funniest of all of them.
Because it was basically like
Cubs fans on Twitter.
Yeah,
they were like, we need a shortstop.
Yeah,
and the Blue Jays will trade for this really bad Dansby Swanson contract, and we're gonna get Bo Bichette.
Well, I don't even think they're trying to get rid of Swanson. Sometimes they were like, "Hey, we're gonna have Swanson and Horner," and I'm like, "No, you're not."
It doesn't work that
also
way.
In the middle of the Blue Jays. I heard there was talks about them shedding some payroll if they got Ohtani, but it was just dumb. That was they just basically were like, "We want Bo Bichette," and so they started a rumor they're getting Bo Bichette. But
that was
anyway,
funny.
Sandy, you haven't talked about the lineup yet, but I feel like we're probably pretty similar. I started out by saying I think I'm going to be pretty cordial here, but maybe it's because I think the Cardinals have a top 5 lineup, and so if you're talking about a 12th or 13th lineup in baseball, that's a huge difference to me. So it's a fine lineup, but it's nowhere close to a top 5 unit.
I actually don't think it's that good. Cody Bellinger, Nico Horner, Jan Gomes, and 4 other guys in their lineup have in common? They all got lucky last year, and they all overperformed their metrics. Cody Bellinger was the luckiest hitter in all of baseball last year. There's just not a good way around that. It's absurd. He outperformed his expected metrics by about 40 points across the board, which guys just don't do. And I definitely can't see it happening twice in a row. He doesn't have a good enough quality of contact to consistently outperform the metrics the way other guys like Mookie Betts or Ronald Acuna Jr. do. Am I surprised when Ronald Acuna Jr. is better than he should have been? No, because he's really good to start with. I'm not saying Cody Bellinger is not a good player, but I just don't see him having a borderline MVP candidate season again without hitting the ball much harder, hitting it at a better angle much more frequently, and also he's not going to be playing the outfield quite as often, so he's going to accrue less value that way. So I'm actually pretty down on him. Also, some of the other guys, you mentioned the 1-2 punch with Swanson and Horner. That's just, there's no teeth there. Those are very average hitters. I'm not saying they're not good players. Like you said, they're both 5-win players because of what they contribute defensively, and I'm not going to deny that. Nico Horner is a great defensive player, but he's a 99 OPS plus guy. That's below league average, and that's a park adjusted stat.
Has he ever been above league average offensively?
Once, but it was in a smaller sample size.
Okay.
And Dansby Swanson, we know who Dansby Swanson is as a player. He had one great year with the Braves, and he had it at the right time. He's not that hitter most years. He also doesn't have the same protection in this lineup that he had in what's probably the best lineup we've seen in a while in Atlanta. So I think you got to talk about that too. Seiya Suzuki is a fine hitter. I honestly am surprised that he's getting such a great projection from Fangraphs and Zips and stuff, because like he's been over 120 once. So I don't know. I'd be surprised if he even meets that. I think their lineup is fine. Like Josh said, I probably have them a little bit lower. I think they're right around the 15th mark. It's not a bad lineup, but I don't think it's a really good lineup. And like Josh said, I think in terms of at least position player depth, the Cardinals might have the deepest lineup in the division for sure. One of the deepest lineups in baseball. I can't say the deepest because the Braves and Dodgers and exist. But I think they're not super comparable. And also the Cardinals' depth options are better. I like Alec Burleson, Ivan Herrera. I like those guys a lot better than I like some of the depth options available to the Cubs. Also, the Contreras-Gomes comparison is crazy. Like, Contreras is a very good hitter. Gomes is a very bad hitter. So, yeah.
So here's where maybe we should turn the conversation again here too, because I think maybe where I'm baking in some growth and some help in the lineup is with the young talent.
Sure.
Because you do have a Michael Busch there this year. So if Cubs fans are watching this, I'm trying to give your flowers a little bit. You have Michael Busch. Those are like the pitcher you gave up. The Dodgers are going to find a way to make him amazing. When I saw that, I was like, okay, that I know what they're doing. But giving up Michael Busch was interesting, and that's a great person to have in the Cardinals lineup, the Cubs lineup. He could take a step forward. Obviously, Christopher Morel could as well. I'm not as high on him as other people are, but like, could I see him being one of their top 3 hitters? And like, not because they're bad enough for that, like he could ascend to that. Sure. And then also, I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong didn't record a single hit last year when he came up. He had a negative WAR. It was terrible.
Good.
But like, he's an awesome defender. So that's his calling card, but maybe he's decent offensively as well. So I think you've got already just like 3 guys right there that could do things, but then they also have other interesting prospects that, like Kevin Alcantara, I think is supposed to come up this year. They've got some other guys. Matt Shaw potentially could do something. So they've got some bats that could bake in. And then most outlets have them as a top 5 system in all of baseball. I know some of that's like further out talent. So I think there's room for growth here outside of those like Yan Gomes and all these guys that did stuff before. But Andrew, what are you doing? What are you thinking with that?
Yeah, I feel like the young talent is definitely something that I feel like I'll factor that in 2025 more than I will in 2024. I feel like a lot of those guys aren't quite ready yet. And I feel like the reason I kind of jumped the gun and was like the Cubs kind of took a step back because I feel like some of that young talent isn't going to be fully ready, or they're going to be just proving themselves at the major league level this season. And you can't really rely on rookies that often. Like, very rarely a rookie will come up and mash and then just stay mashing the entire time. I don't know if I don't know if the Cubs have any of those guys on their roster currently. Maybe I'm wrong, and they have a couple guys that really pop off. And in that case, we'll take all the heat from the Cubs fans on TikTok. That's fine.
Yeah, I like it. I just think, like you said, there isn't really a super impactful piece that's going to come up right away. Like, I think Pete Crow Armstrong is good. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be a really valuable player, but I think he's more like Nico Horner than Chris Bryant. And by that, I mean, I just don't see him coming up and immediately being an offensive force. He has his tools grayed out, but like we see young guys come up and it's hard to acclimate to the MLB level. Jordan Walker came up with better tools than any Cardinals prospect or any Cubs prospect in a long time. And it took a while for him to acclimate. And even once he did, he was still a very mediocre hitter for much of the year. Don't get me wrong. I'm super high on Jordan Walker for this year. I think he's going to break out in a big way. I think everyone here does at New News. But I think there's a good chance Pete Crow Armstrong comes up and he looks really just okay at the plate. He's immediately going to be an impactful defender once he gets those opportunities in center. But yeah, after that, I think that's the best prospect who will come up for them this year. Michael Busch is so weird to me. If the Dodgers are moving on from a guy, especially a prospect, I always am kind of like, oh, maybe he's not that great. He's also really old. There are big questions about Michael Busch. I don't know. I'd be really surprised if he gives them more than Patrick Wisdom has given them in the lineup the past few years, to be honest. And Wisdom's been okay there. So
yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I think I'm going to try and pump both of our breaks, or at least maybe kind of center us a little bit. Is like, I know we've all been super high on Victor Scott. And so I think I don't want us to get too like with Pete Crow, like I don't want to diminish what he can like be like, oh, well, he's like a defense for speed guy. And we know those guys start slow, but then out the other side of my mouth be like Victor Scott's can be the next best thing since sliced bread when it comes up.
Sure.
It's their speed is different though. Like Scott has
very much
is just so like I do think there's a difference there. And I do think his rapid development last year, like the scouting industry is catching up to that. And I just don't think they're really acknowledging that he's just continuing to do that. So that's where, but like the difference though is like Pete Crow Armstrong is going to be it could be like their ninth hitter in this lineup that I'm not that excited about. And Victor Scott would be the ninth hitter in a top 5 lineup in baseball. And they don't really need him to be that. So like, that's where I feel like, to your point, like, I don't think Crow is a guy that's going to elevate their ceiling offensively as a team. So I do agree there. He might make them better defensively, which again, we've seen Cardinal teams win a lot of games because they have really good pitching and really good defense. So if you've got Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Cody Bellinger, Pete Crow Armstrong, like all these really good defenders, that means a lot. But I do think like Busch, some of the other guys could make a significant impact. So is there any, like, before we kind of try to figure out what they're going to do on the season and compare them to other NL Central teams, is there any other lingering roster thoughts you guys have with them?
Yeah, I think real quick, I want to weigh in on the VS2 discussion. I think Victor Scott at the plate, I will say, has more offensive upside than PCA. And I think that bears out immediately, like you said, because of that speed. Also, we've talked to Victor, and he has talked about how he's adding power to his game. I think that's worth mentioning. Pete Crow Armstrong probably has a better power tool right now, but that really hasn't shown out a ton in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And Victor Scott, obviously, his hit tool is pretty elite. So I think that might be a little bit better than PCA as well. But again, can't take away from the fact that defensively, he's one of the best prospects we've ever seen. I'm not going to deny that at all. Also, one more storyline here with these Cubs. It's pretty interesting. I've heard people comparing them to the Cubs back of 2015 when it kind of felt like they had something building. And I think that this is not comparable to that iteration of the Cubs. And I think the reason is what we've been discussing here. You don't have the type of impact players that are ready immediately that you know are going to impact your roster. Like Chris Bryant came up, immediately started contending for MVPs, won a Rookie of the Year, right away was one of the best players in baseball. They just don't have that. Also, they don't have an Anthony Rizzo on the roster right now that is an all-star level hitter. Like there are okay hitters on this team. There's no one like Rizzo who you know is super consistent, who you know is going to put up really good numbers, and who's going to provide that protection in the lineup. I won't even say Bellinger's as good as Rizzo was back then.
Oh, I feel like the consistency is maybe missed, but also I think we're also projecting like Rizzo. How many years had he been really good before 2015? I can't remember. I think he's still decently young. So like,
yeah,
I mean, I know that Bellinger just had a career year after a couple of bad seasons, but he also has won an MVP before and been close to winning an MVP too. So it's like
Rizzo was coming off of an elite all-star year.
Okay. Which Bellinger is too. I do recognize that it's, but I would say that they've got at least one of those pieces, but maybe they're missing the Bryant and then also the mixture of the Contreras and
No
Zobrist, like all this stuff. Like I
Yeah.
think it's more like they had like a rapid ascension where they had all this stuff building for so many years because they bottomed out and then boom, they've kind of rebuilt on the fly. So now they got kind of bad for a little bit, but then got pretty back to relevancy quicker. And so now they're going to be that 80-ish couple wins team for last year, this year, and then maybe next year is where they can push for to be more like the 2015 Cubs than they are this year. I don't think they're the 2014 Cubs this year because that team is really bad. But I feel like they're somewhere like they're close. They're not 2015, but they're not 20. They're somewhere between there.
Sure.
So it's interesting. So yeah, let's compare on the rest of NL Central then. So you guys have talked. I know we didn't really talk about the Pirates, but like
there's not a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
maybe O'Neal Cruz goes 30-30.
Maybe. I like their young pitching. That's what I think is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, but
if you look at the scope of the NL Central, let's go 1 through 5. And then let's try to hone in on the Cubs as much as we can with this too, since this is a Cubs preview. But I feel like at this point, we've pretty much previewed the whole NL Central. We can kind of give our takes for why we think one team's the best going through. Do we want to each give our individual, or do we want to each say who we think the best team in the division is and then go down from there? Like, what do we think?
I kind of like that.
Who the best team in the division is.
Maybe we can work our way bottom up. Yeah.
Okay, we'll start. I'm gonna go. My
sneaky pick is Cardinals from there because I don't really want to say these things before the season starts.
Oh gosh. So wait. So what was that?
No, I just don't omit the Cardinals from the discussion here because I'm going to put them first, but then when they don't finish first, then people are.
I'm just going to put the Cardinals first.
We're
anyway,
going to have to do it.
Okay. Yeah.
Fifth. I'm going Brewers 5th.
Wow.
I'm getting bold. I think the fact that they've just continued to mess up their clubhouse is going to kill some of the vibes in there and continue to kill the vibes in there. Their rotation is terrible right now, and I know they have young pitching coming up, but I think that's really risky having it be Freddie Peralta and a bunch of if you thought the Cardinals, it looks like the Cardinals rotation last year, not great. And then the problem is their lineup is also not good enough to make up for a not good pitching staff. They've been carried by their pitching staff for so long, and now it might be their weakness. I like their lineup coming up. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to say they're finished last, but I know that's like a hot take. I'm not sold on that one, but I just kind of like betting on the Pirates for once. They're going to finish 4th. So I gave you my 4th already, but you guys, I'm guessing you guys picked Pirates 5th.
You're treating the Pirates like I'm treating the A's in the AL West.
No, I'm not. I'm picking them 4th.
No, I'm picking the A's 4th.
Oh, okay. I got you.
I'll take the Pirates last. I think it's just, I don't know. I'm not super impressed with the Pirates. Brian Hayes has been really disappointing to me. As good as he is defensively, I thought there was a better bat there, and there's just not. And I think that's really disappointing for Pirates fans too. Now, he could be one of those Nico Horner types who in a good year is a little bit over league average maybe. But I'm just disappointed in that. I will say though, Josh mentioned it earlier, the Pirates young pitching is kind of crazy. It's really impressive. Paul Skeens is the headliner here. But they've also got some studs like Jared Jones, Anthony Solometo, Bubba Chandler, some of these guys in the higher minors. Listen to this real quick.
Priester as well.
Yeah, and Quinn Priester actually graduated from their top 30 at some point too. So pretty impressive what they've put together. Of their top 14 prospects, 12 are pitchers. And then of those guys, listen to this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are at AA or higher. And that's not including Quinn Priester. So it's a pretty impressive thing they've put together. The Pirates are going to have depth to burn. Maybe that results in them making a couple trades to fortify their position player core. We'll have to see. But just on the offensive side, besides O'Neal Cruz, I don't really know what I'm super into in Pittsburgh. Jack Swinsky has been fine. Brian Reynolds took a big step backwards last year, but it's good they have him locked in long-term, I guess. So I don't know. Pirates last for me. Yeah, I think that's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, I feel like you pretty much hit all the points that I would hit.
Okay.
So
who's your guys' 4th place pick then?
I think the Cubs. Oh, wait, no. This
is hard.
Sorry.
This division is really competitive.
Sorry. No. The Brewers.
I was gonna say, wow. Okay, he's had the Brewers. What about you, Sandy?
I think I'll take the Brewers 4th too. The Brewers too. Like you said, messing with the clubhouse, moving on from guys like Hader, and I know Hader's been gone for a while. But his presence he was just so good, and not having him even now stinks for them. Also, moving on from Corbin Burns, which we talked about on here, that's a big deal. When they still had Burns, I was actually really high on the Brewers. I had them making the playoffs. I think Burns is that good. So moving on from him is really bad, and that's going to hurt them a lot because you're not replacing Burns with Freddie Peralta. You're replacing Burns with the next worst guy who's coming into that rotation from the bottom. They do have some interesting prospects. They've got that Miswicks guy. I don't know how to say his name. It's like weird. Who could impact the team right away. He's pretty good. Also, if Jackson Chourio comes up, he's the true impact prospect that we're talking about that the Cubs don't have. That could be interesting. And if that happens, and if he comes up early and really does play well, he could have a Gunnar Henderson, Corbin Carroll-like impact on that team. And if that happens, I could easily see the Brewers competing for second place in the division. I don't know if they're going to win it, though. I don't know if they'll jump 3 other teams.
Yeah, I mean, just look at their rotation, though, dude. Like, I cannot get past Peralta. Wade Miley is your 2, Jacob Junis is your 3, Colin Ray, and DL
Junis.
Hall. Like, I'm just
DL Hall could be good. I don't hate DL Hall.
Yeah. Sal Frelick is batting 3rd for them. What are we doing?
That's pretty bad.
So,
Keston Hero would have to have a bounce back year.
Yeah. Is he still in that organization?
Oh, wait, no, Keston Hero is gone.
Wait, he's gone? That's my bad. Sure. He's been MIA forever. He was so good when he first came up there.
But anyway, but I mean, they've got William Contreras, who I like, but they added Rhys Hoskins. Anyways, I just think that rotation, I just feel like that lineup is pretty mid, and then the pitching stuff is terrible. So that's why I just cannot see them competing for a playoff spot. But who knows? 3rd, I will go the Cubs, but I think the gap between 1 and 3 is probably only a few games. I don't really think I'm not saying they're a distant 3rd. I think it's like, I think the highest the NL Central team that wins the division wins is probably 90, 91 games at most. And I would put the Cubs around 85, 86 wins. So maybe a little less, but I don't think I'm not trying to act like the 2nd and 3rd place teams are miles ahead of the Cubs. At least on paper, I could see a scenario where these top 2 teams pull away from the Cubs for sure, but I'm not going to go out there and say that necessarily. But yeah, I just think it's a fine rotation. It's a fine lineup. They need a lot of those guys to pop off to make it happen. Some of them might, some of them won't. I'm picking the Cubs 3rd.
Yeah, I think you had me as well. I feel like the Reds have a much higher ceiling. We'll get to them in a second. I feel like the Reds could run away with this division if the young talent pops off. I feel like that team is kind of like the 2015 Cubs in some ways. I know the young talent debuted last year, but we could see it continue to go. Matt McClain, somebody that I really like, and those young arms as well. And there's even this shortstop prospect. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's not talked about all that often, but he could become really good.
Mid. Man, This is really hard. I think I'm gonna go with the Cubs 3rd. The Cubs have less variance, I think, than the Reds for sure. Like there's a world in which the wheels fall off for this Reds team. Although I think that world exists for almost every team in this division.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really hard here to differentiate between the Cubs and the Reds, especially. But I'm gonna have to pick the. I'll take the Cubs here still. Solidifying my answer. It's the Cubs. I think the Reds just have the higher ceiling, like Andrew said. I also like the Reds' young talent just better than the Cubs. I like their lineup a lot more than the Cubs. I think the Reds are likely to finish in the top 10 in terms of OPS plus, WRC plus, runs scored. Can't see the Cubs doing that. Even if guys have lucky years again, can't see the Cubs doing that. Like Andrew said, I love McClain. I like Benson way more than I wish I did. Encarnacion Strand is exciting. Obviously, Ellie De La Cruz exists and is good at baseball.
Is he?
I kind of want them to sign Joey Votto. Yeah, he's really good, or will be really good someday. I kind of want them to sign Joey Votto. I'm not as high on the Reds' young pitching as some people are, though. Like, I just haven't seen it from Hunter Green yet. He shows it in flashes and then also has starts where he walks the house and gives up a bunch of hard contact. So apparently Lodolo is healthier than I thought he was earlier in the offseason too, which really scares me. I'm super high on him. So yeah, I'll take the Cubs at 3rd, Reds at 2nd for me.
Yeah, I'll go Red 2nd as well. I like Daddy Montas. I like Daddy Martinez. I feel like they've got pitching depth now that they haven't had in a while. Lodolo coming back, Hunter Green. Alexis Diaz, Emilio Pagan. They've got a decent bullpen
Very
as well, which was a major weakness of theirs last year, and at times. And so I feel like the fact that they fortified it some more has been really helpful. Also high on their lineup. I don't think it's as good as the Cardinals lineup, but I think but obviously, like, if a lot of those guys hit their 80th percentile projections, like a De La Cruz and Marte, a Benson, Steer, McLean, Friedel, like, that's where they continue to rise. But I also, I mean, some, like, even in a weird advantage the Cardinals have is that a lot of this young talent for the Reds are hitting year 2, and so it's like all of them could take a step forward year 2, but there's also sometimes this like little bit of a, I mean, we've seen at the Cardinals where they kind of stay a little bit the same, or they take incremental improvement. Injuries are a thing, or they struggle a little bit in year 2, sophomore slump. And the Cardinals have a lot of guys that are entering their 3rd full big league season, or like a Jordan Walker is Jordan Walker. So, like, sorry, Ellie De La Cruz, but Jordan Walker outschooled you last year. So there's a lot. I feel a lot more confident in Walker year 2 than I do De La Cruz. And then also, like, the Cubs don't have veteran bats like the Cardinals do. The Cardinals have Goldschmidt, they have Arenado, they have Contreras. India is kind of a veteran bat for them now, Candelario, which I'm like, okay, whatever. And Tyler Stevenson, I would take the Cardinals core 3 veteran bats over theirs, and then the young bats I think are pretty comparable, if not on the Cardinals side right now. So yeah, I'm saying that the Reds is a 2, but I think there's a world where they catch fire and they have that 2015 type Cubs season where they make the playoffs. They're super awesome. I do think the Reds make the playoffs, but I see them as the wild card team.
Yeah, I think the Reds are probably going to make the playoffs. I think that was what I had in my prediction as well. But I think one of the NL Central teams is going to win a wild card spot this year. Maybe for the first time, an NL Central team will actually make it out of the wild card round in the time that it exists. Okay. You guys continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks like we all 3 have the Cardinals at the top of the division too. So I guess maybe we'll continue to talk more about the Cubs and Cardinals, or at least the Cardinals, as we go into the regular season. But do any of you guys think the Cardinals are like significantly better than the Reds? Or I think it's a couple games. I'm not. I'm not.
I think it's like 5 or 6 games. I think it's a little bigger than people are giving them credit for. Like, the Cardinals fixed problems this offseason. And this Cardinals team is, in my opinion, like, on paper as good as last year's Cardinals team. And I know last year's Cardinals team like really stunk in a lot of ways, but remember coming into the season, how people felt about that team. I think a lot of what went wrong was weird. I think the way people felt about that team should be similar to the way people feel about this team. It's a good team. There's a lot to like about this Cardinals team. Like, the lineup is really strong. The rotation is pretty decent. Andrew, I see you laughing at me, but I'll keep saying this. Like, this team has a lot to like. And I think there's a reason that basically no matter what, betting site you're on, the Cardinals are the favorites to win the division. And I think that's notable. Pundits might be saying stuff for, clicks and hot takes. Oh, the Reds are this, or yeah, the Cubs like can overthrow the Cardinals in the division. I still think the Cardinals are the team to beat.
Yeah.
Well, you've teed me up perfectly for our final segment of this episode. I got this really interesting question on Twitter the other day, Sandy.
Don't say that. Stop.
How many All-Stars are the Cardinals going to have in 2024?
Stop it right now. Mo needs us to hold his water.
Sandy, how many All-Stars? Wait, real quick. You got to explain the context, because some people are going to be like, what the heck is happening?
Longtime viewers of the channel will remember our Cubs preview episode from last year, which was admittedly terrible and all wrong, and I hated on the Cubs for an hour, which was cathartic, and I enjoyed it very much. But I can no longer hate on the Cubs in the same way.
Just so you know, real quick, when you say your take, I'm going to hit the button again. So be prepared to pause for a second.
That's fine.
Keep going.
I would say the Cardinals will have 3 All-Stars this year.
Wait. What was your take last year?
The take last year was 7, and it was. They will have 3 this year. I was naive and I was too excited. I'd been baseball starved. They will have 3 All-Stars this year. Sonny Gray is going to make the All-Star game, I think. I think one of Goldie or Arenado is always a good bet to make the All-Star game. And then I think Helsley has a really good shot. Maybe Nootbaar, maybe Donovan. but not all of them at the same time.
I'll say like 3 or 4 because I think Contreras is a good bet. Sonny Gray is a good bet, or Helsley, one of those two. But then, or so like Sonny Gray, Helsley, and Contreras, I figure, are all good bets. Arenado could be at third base. Outfield's really hard to make with how deep the NL is. So Newbar and Walker.
At least Mookie Betts is at second now, which means Gorman can't make it.
Well, he can't make it as a starter, but he could make it behind him. But obviously, Ozzie Albies, stuff like that. So I think there's enough guys that could. But yes, the Sandy did say 7, so it was a very optimistic take last year.
Look, I've grown up a lot since then.
There's a certain Cubs hater that's gonna, or a Cubs lover that would love to meme you for that again. So we'll see if he sees this podcast or not. But
that was the worst meme video, or like it was just so poorly put together. All right, I'll leave it at that. Moving on.
Stars.
Oh, Brady, don't say that. No.
I think he's a really good shot of making the All-Star team this year, actually.
I never said All-Star team. I just said he'd be a good rookie because he's a reliever who could immediately impact the bullpen.
But then you did say Walker. Didn't you say Walker would be an All-Star?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, if you said Walker was an All-Star, Freddie was the best rookie.
Yeah, I thought if Waino was like half decent last year in his, like, if he was 2022 Waino in his retirement, they might have said, "Oh yeah, we'll give him like a fun vote." I didn't think that was super unreasonable if he was good. I didn't see Waino falling off a cliff. I don't know if anyone saw it.
Serious? No, I think the Dodgers are going to have 7 All-Stars, but that
probably. What? Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Clayton Kershaw.
No. Kershaw won't pitch first half.
Oh, you're right. He won't.
Yamamoto.
Shohei Ohtani.
Who else then?
Gavin Lux has a good shot if he accrues enough value.
Your guy.
Glasnow has a good shot.
No on Lux. Glasnow, yeah. That's true.
What about one of their relievers? Evan Phillips, maybe?
One of their relievers, I feel like always.
Brady, it's a witty no-hitter. Oh, gosh. Okay, I feel like we're dissolving this.
Yeah, we are way off track.
Well, this was a Cubs preview. Now we're talking about Dodgers All-Star. So good job, Andrew, for making it about Ohtani again.
Yep.
Thanks, Andrew. Just kidding. Anyways, if you guys really want a Pirates preview, let us know. Otherwise, we're excited about their young core, but yeah, sorry, Pirates fans. You can meme this if you want to when you finish first place somehow this year. Otherwise, we'll be back on Sunday with Katie Wu. She's live at spring training right now, and we're going to ask her about, obviously, there's a lot of situations right now. The Brandon Crawford signing, center field's interesting because with Tommy Edmonds hurt, maybe there's an opening for Victor Scott there. Maybe it's the Carlson thing. What's Edmonds' timeline look like? What's the bullpen? What's the rotation? There's a lot of storylines. So we're excited to have Katie on to talk about her perspective on it from spring training. Otherwise, really thankful you guys jumped on as usual. If you aren't subscribed already, please subscribe. Helps the channel out a ton. Like and comment on the video as well. We'd love to hear your feedback and share it with anyone that you think would be interested in our Cardinals content. We've got a lot of stuff coming. You've seen some of our top 10 videos recently, so we've got some more fun videos like that, but doing some player profiles. But then also we've got some new content that we haven't put out yet that in the pipeline that we're working on. You know what I'm talking about. Yep. So we're really excited. So subscribe to keep up to date with all of our new stuff. I think it's like 80% of viewers usually aren't subscribed. So a lot of you aren't subscribed already. Please subscribe if you are interested in more of this, and we will see you next time.